Good morning. We will in our last discussion we were looking at these arguments based on let me see. Purisaka nuyoga, human action. The question we were discussing was, I was pointing to you question about what we call infinite regression, because if you talk about for example, a doer and a doer, and the doer of the doer, then of course, that is the end result. So we had Sakavadi asking, I'm in this handout, I'm in page 15, under number 10, examination by human action. Do you have the same thing or do you have a different thing? It's different, right? So let me see. This is this is page 19. 19, we completed C, but we will start with C. Does the doer of that doer exist? Yes. It is applicable to that person, and so on. Then there is no ending of suffering, no cutting off the cycle of existence, no nibbana without residue. So that is the last argument we discussed. Now the point there is, in fact, talking about infinitely going back. Now, if you accept that, then there is no ending to suffering. So, this is basically a logical argument, and based on that, you have ethical argument. Tassakatta kareta upalabbhati amanta. Tasataseva natti dukkasanta kiriya, natti vattupachedo, natti anupada paranibbananti, nahevang vattabbe. So this is page 41, concluding paragraph. So tassa katta kareta upalabbhati. So if you accept the doer of human action, then the next question is the doer of that doer. It goes back. And then next argument goes, Kalyana papakani kammani upalabhantiti, Kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakareta upalabhatiti. Amanta, Puggalo upalabhatiti, Puggalasa kattakareta upalabhatiti, nahevang vattabbi. Now, there the argument is admitting that action exists. Does the doer of action exist? This page 19, number D. Admitting that action exists, does the doer of the action exist? So the Paravadi accepts that there is a doer for Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam, good and bad actions, right? And then because Paravadi accepts that, Sakavadi asks, okay, if you accept the doer of good and bad actions, Kalyana papakani kammani upalabbanti, Kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakareta upalabhati. So, good and bad actions exist, and also there is an author for good and bad actions. Now, if that is accepted by the Paravadi, then Sakavadi asks, he says, Amanta, then Puggalo upalabhatiti. Puggalasa kattakareta upalabhatiti. Now, the argument is Puggalo upalabhatiti is acceptable to the Paravadi, because that is his main claim. But Puggalasa kattakareta upalabhati is not. Because then, you go back to the same problem of infinitely regressing. Puggalassa Kathākareta upalabbati, Puggala upalabbati, the first agent, Puggalassa Kathākareta upalabbati, second agent. Then you can go on. Puggalassa Kattassa Kareta upalabbati, and so on. You can go to the third level, you can go to the fourth level, and so on. So that is why Paravadi says, Nahevang vattabbe, one must not say so. Now, in fact, the Pali is also pretty straightforward here to follow that. So, Puggala upalabbati iti, Puggalassa Kathākareta upalabbati iti, Nahevang vattabbe. That is described under D. One must not say so. Then we move on to the next argument, Sakavadi's question. Admitting that action exists, does the doer of action exist? Yes. Again, Kalyana Papakani Kammani Upalabbanti, Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Kathākareta upalabbati. Good and bad actions exist, and there is a doer. Then it is connected with Nibbana. Admitting that Nibbana exists, does the doer of Nibbana exist? One should not say so. So, Nibbanam upalabbati, Nibbanassa Kathākareta upalabbati, Nahevang vattabbe. Now, the next question, Nibbanam upalabbati. Now, that question is again acceptable to Paravadi. He accepts Nirvana exists. But then the question is, Nibbanassa Kathākareta upalabbati, is there a doer for Nibbana? So, Kalyana Papakani Kammani exist, Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Kathākareta upalabbati exists. Nibbana exists, does the doer of Nibbana exist? Now, you see the problem here is we need to see the on the one hand, the questions are similar at a logical level. Something like actions exist, doer of actions exist. So for both these things, yes. Then Nibbana exists? Again, yes. Does a doer of exist? Now, for this question, he says no. No, in the sense the Nahevang vattabbe. Now, you can look at this problem from two perspectives. One is, you just look at the structure of the sentence. The structure of the two sentences are very similar. Okay? Actions exist. Kalyana Papakani Kammani upalabbanti? Yes. Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Kathākareta upalabbati? Yes. Nibbana exists? Nibbanam upalabbati? Yes. Kathākareta Nibbana upalabbati? No. Now, if you look at the structures of the two questions are similar, but of course the meaning is different. And then also if you look at the idea, if you talk about an action, then you can talk about a doer of the action, right? But then existence of nirvana and existence of action, are they similar? Now, this is the important issue, because although structurally two sentences are similar, now on the one hand you can talk about the action, on the other hand you can talk about the Nibbana. Interesting thing is, in a way we know that action doesn't exist without someone who is doing the action, right? Action cannot exist without a doer. But Nibbana, can Nibbana exist without doer, or does Nibbana has a doer? Now, it's very interesting. in the traditional understanding, Nibbana is a Lokuttara Dhamma existing independent of the person who realizes Nibbana. But my own personal view is not. So actually, according to my understanding, and you don't worry about too much my understanding, but how I believe is Nirvana cannot exist without a person who is realizing it. But that's a different issue. But according to the traditional Theravada understanding, Nirvana is a separate Lokuttara Dhamma. Whether there is anyone experiencing or not, Nirvana exists. Okay? Now, that view is acceptable to both Sakavadi and Paravadi. So, therefore, both Sakavadi and Paravadi cannot accept doer of Nibbana. Because there is no doer for Nibbana, because Nibbana is a Lokuttara Dhamma that exists. So, whether there is a doer or not, of course, there is no doer. But you can talk about the experiencer of Nibbana, one who realizes Nibbana. But according to Theravada understanding and general Buddhist understanding, whether you realize that or not, Nirvana exists. So that's why for this question, Nahevang Mattabbe, for both Sakavadi and Paravadi, this question is not acceptable. But Sakavadi tests the Paravadi, but Paravadi gives the right answer in the sense he says, Nahevang Mattabbe. So, you have to see on the one hand, grammatically, the two sentences are very similar. But if you take the meaning is, very different. So that is so in this debate, if you really misunderstand the grammar, you are in trouble. Also, if you misunderstand the Dhamma, so there are two things. On the one hand, you have to see the correct grammatically correct. Grammatically, two sentences are similar. Now, that is misleading. Unless you understand the Dhamma, if you say yes to the last question, then you are in trouble. So, this is the whole point. So, admitting that action exists, does a doer of action exist? Yes. Admitting that Nibbana exists, does a doer of Nibbana exist? One should not say so. Now, the same form of argument is made with regard to earth, ocean, mountain, sineru, water, heat, air, grass, wood, and trees. Now, you can see that the same form of argument is being made with regard to many other things. Now, next argument you have, Kalyana Papakani Kammani Upalabhantiti, Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Kathākareta Upalabhati Amanta, Mahapatavi Upalabhatiti, Mahapataviya Kathākareta Upalabhatiti, Nahevang Mattabbe. And then Mahapatavi, not only Mahapatavi, ocean, mountain, sineru, water. Why Nirvana we can understand. Why you cannot accept the doer for Mahapatavi or earth, sineru, ocean? Why not a doer? What is the reason? Okay, it goes to the Issara Nimmanavada, God's creation, right? If you accept that, there is a doer for the Mahapatavi, then, you are going to the creationist view. So, all these things, ocean, mountain, sineru, water, heat, air, pataviyapo, tejo, vayo, grass, tinakatta, wood, trees, and, all these things. So, the same argument is applicable to all these things. Okay, we will move on to the next argument, Sakavadi. Admitting that action exists, does the doer of that action exist? Of course, yes. Action is one, the doer of the action is another. One should not say so. Okay, that is page 43. Kalyana papakani kammani upalabbanti iti kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakareta upalabbati iti amanta. Anyani kalyana papakani kammani anyo kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakaretati nahevang vattabbe. So on the one hand you talk about kalyana papaka kamma, and also you talk about the doer of kalyana papaka kamma. Then the next question Sakavadi asks from the Paravadi is Anyani kalyana papakani kammani anyo kalyana papakanam kammanam katta. So the kalyana papakani kammani are different from kalyana papaka kamma's doer. Now again, although you can talk about Nibbana without person who is experienced or anything, you cannot talk about action without the person who is performing that action. Now again, for the sake of say understanding, for the sake of saying, we can say Kalyana Papaka's kammas exist and the doer of the Kalyana Papaka kammas also exist. But you can't separate them. You remember, this reminds us of Nagarjuna's arguments, right? Because how can you talk about the doer without doing? How can you talk about an action without a person who is doing the action? And at the same time, how can you talk about the person who is doing action without action? So the person becomes katta kareta so long as the person does that. So, it's this kind of the similar argument here. So, anyani kalyana papakani kammani, anyo kalyana papakanam kammanam katta karetati nahevang vattabbe. One should not say so. That's now the same form of argument is made with regard to the effect, vipaka, and it is experience. Now, if you look at then following argument, the same form of argument is made with regard to that, and kalyana papakana. Then kalyana papakanam kammanam vipako upalabbati iti amanta. Kalyana kammakanam papanam vipaka patisangvedi upalabbati iti nahevang vattabbe. Okay, that is actually given as the Paravadi argument, but I have written it as a Sakavadi argument. So, Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Vipaka. So, earlier it was the action, now it is the Vipaka. Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Vipaka Patisangvedi Upalabbati Nehevang Vattabbe. Then Kalyana Papakanam Vipako Upalabbati Kalyana Papakanam Kammanam Vipaka Patisangvedi Amanta. Tassa Patisangvedi Upalabbati Nehevang Vattabbe. Now that is the argument, the infinite regressive argument, because you are talking about the Vipaka Patisangvedi and the Vipaka Patisangvedi of the Patisangvedi. So experience of the experience. Now if you say Tassa Patisangvedi Upalabbati iti amanta Tassa tasseva natti dukkha santakiriya. Now same form of conclusion. If you accept the experience of the experiencer, then you have to accept also experience of the experience of the experiencer and so on. Then ultimately it doesn't, end there. Natti vattu pacchedo natti anupada paranibbānanti nehevang vattabbe. In my summary, I say there are 5 main arguments in this section. Doer and the instigator of good and bad actions, effect and the experience of the effects of good and bad actions, then divine happiness and human happiness, apaya suffering and niraya suffering, 4 positions regarding doer and experiencer, and the 4 positions regarding the authorship of happiness and suffering. Existence, athi of action and effect. The structure of the detailed argument is basically the same. Now, further, this is just a summary, but if you look at the text, you can see that, argument goes on. Kalyana papakanam kammanam vipako upalabbati iti kalyana papakanam kammanam vipaka patisangvedi maha patavi upalabbati iti maha samuddo upalabbati iti sineru pabbato upalabbati iti apo tejo, and it goes on like that. And page 44, Kalyana papakanam kammanam vipako upalabbati iti kalyana papakanam kammanam vipaka patisangvedi amanta anyo kalyana papakanam kammanam vipako anyo kalyana papakanam vipaka patisangvedi iti nehevang vattabbe. And then the argument dibban sukang upalabbati iti amanta dibbasa sukasa patisangvedi upalabbati iti nehevang vattabbe. So that is on the divine happiness. So the similar argument on Dibban Sukang, divine happiness. So it goes on Dibban Sukang Upalabbati iti, Dibba Sukas, so on, so on. Then next argument is on Manusakang Sukang Upalabbati iti amanta, Manusakas Sukas Patisangvedi upalabbati iti nehevang vattabbe. Manusakang sukang upalabbati iti amanta, manusakas sukas patisangvedi upalabbati iti nehevang vattabbe. That's on divine happiness and also about human happiness. Now the same form of argument goes on manusakang sukang. So if we don't need to go through all these things, apaikan dukkang, this Purisaka nuyoga goes on, neraikan dukkang, and so on. And page 48, we have Kalyana papakani kammani upalabbanti iti kalyana papakanam kammanam kathākareta vipaka patisangvedi upalabbati iti amanta so karoti so patisangvedeti nehevang vattabbe. Now the same question and ask, and it is connected with so karoti so patisangvedeti nehevang vattabbe. Now again we know, we are familiar with this question because in the Sanyutta Nikaya, you know that this question is found someone asking from the Buddha, so karoti, so patisangvedeti, anyo karoti, anyo patisangvedeti. So this question is not acceptable because then you are committing to the idea that the same person goes on in the samsara. So so karoti, so patisangvedeti is not acceptable. So karoti, so patisangvedeti amanta. Sayankatan dukkanti nehevang vattabbe. Now the next question, so karoti so patisambedeti, Paravadi answers amanta. Why that? Because Paravadi accepts a Pudgala. Because he accepts the Pudgala, in a way he has to say that it is the same Pudgala. So therefore he says amanta. But then the question is Sayankatan sukadukkanti nehevang vattabbe. But Paravadi doesn't accept the claim Sayankatan Sukadukkham, because that is a different thing. On the one hand, Paravadi has to accept that same person doesn't same person experience because based on his understanding of Pudgala. But on the other hand, at a different level, you can see that Sayankatan Dukkhanti Nahevang Vattabbe. He doesn't accept that. Then the same argument continues. Anyo karoti, anyo patisamvedeti nehevang vattabbe. At one level, he accepts that doer and experience are the same because he has this idea of Pudgala. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to say Anyo Karoti, Anyo Parisamvedeti. Next argument, Anyo Karoti, Anyo Parisamvedeti Amanta. Parankatan Dukkanti Nehevang Attabbe. So in a way he accepts Anyo Karoti, Anyo Parisamvedeti, he says yes, but Parankatan Dukkan, no. Because you see the difficulty here is, on the one hand, at one level, you have to say the continuation of the same person is the one who is doing it, right? So you have to say yes to it. But on the other hand, you have to see these things as two different people. So that's why. Then continuing with that, you have a combination of these things. Kalyana papakani kammani upalabbanti iti kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakareta vipaka patisamvedi upalabbati iti. So not only kattakareta, vipaka patisamvedi is also connected. The experience of the result. Paravadi says yes. Socha anyocha karonti, socha anyocha patisamvedinti iti nehevang vattabbe. Now it is virtually the same question. Only thing is Kattakareta and Vipaka Patisamvediya both are combined together. So then the question is the combined question. So he admits that Kattakareta, Vipaka Patisamvediya exists, but he doesn't want to say Socha Anyocha Karoti, Socha Anyocha Patisamvediti. Then what happens is, it becomes two different people. How can you say there are two different people? On the one hand, you can talk about Katta and Vipaka Patisamvedi, but if you say So Karoti, Socha Karoti, Anyocha Karoti, Socha Anyocha Patisamvedeti, then you are clearly positing two different people, which is not acceptable. Socha Anyocha Karonti, Socha Anyocha Patisamvedenti, Amanta, Sayankatancha Parakatancha Dukkanti Nehevang Vattabbe. So you have to remember that, those questions someone asked from the Buddha. Sayankatan Dukkang, Parakatan Dukkang, Sayankatancha Parakatancha Dukkang, then Asayankarang, Aparankarang, Adicca Samupannam Dukkang. There were these four positions. Neva so karoti, na so patisamvedeti, page 48. Na anyo karoti, na anyo patisamvedeti, na hevang vattabbe. One should not say so. Then, the fourth position, na so karoti, na so patisamvedeti. Na anyo karoti, na anyo patisamvedeti. Now these four positions are combined, but the argument remains the same. Kalyana papakan kammani upalabbanti iti kalyana papakanam kammanam kattakareta vipaka patisamvedi upalabbati iti amanta. So karoti so patisamvedeti, anyo karoti anyo patisamvedeti, socha anyocha karonti, socha anyocha patisamvedenti, neva so karoti. So all the four positions are combined in that, and then he says nehevang vattabbe. Now again the same argument. Sayankatan Dukkang, Parakatan Dukkang, Sayankatancha Parakatancha Dukkang, Asayankarang, Aparankarang. So there you have all those positions presented separately, then combined. This is page 48. Okay. Now you see that is the summary of the whole argument. Now, the argument gets a little bit different here. Kammang attiti amanta. Kammasa karako attiti nehevang vattabbo. Now, kammang attiti amanta. That is Paravadi's question. Whether the kamma exists. Kammasa karako attiti nehevang vattabbe. Now, according to one way of understanding, you cannot talk about kammasa karaka. You remember in the Visuddhimagga and other texts we have kammassa karako natti vipakassacha vedako. There is no doer of the karma. So kammang attiti, yes. Kammassa karako attoti, no. Kammang attiti, karako attiti amanta. Tassa katta kareta titi nehevang vattabbe. So at another level, you can talk about kamma and kammassa karaka. But tassa katta kareta titi, the doer of the action, that is not nehevang vattabbe. Tassa karakovat titi amanta tassa tasseva. Now if you say yes to it, then tassa tasseva natti dukkassa, the same infinite regression argument. Now when you read Kathāvatthu, you have to be careful. Sometimes Paravadi says no to the question and again yes to the same question. Okay? So on the one hand he says yes, on the other hand he says no. So we need to understand there are two different reasons. Of course, the Kathāvatthu text doesn't explain what it is. But if you look at the commentary, sometimes the commentary helps you to understand why he says no, why he says yes to the same question. But generally, I think why he says no to the no and yes to the same question, depending on there are two different ways of understanding the question. So, because there are two different ways of understanding the question, you say yes and you also say no. This set of questions, actually the basic difference is very trivial. Because earlier we had Upalabbati, now we have Atti. In a way we can say there is a difference. When you say upalabbati means it is available for your experience. Upalabbati. However, when you say atti or natti, you are not talking about your experience, you are just making an ontological statement. Yes, it is there. So there is a difference actually. So when we say atti is a general ontological claim about things that exist. But when we say upalabbati is based on personal experience. So kammang attiti, 49, kammakarako attiti, nibbanang attiti, nibbanasakarako attiti, nehevang vattabbo. So the same argument, upalabbati, now it is repeated. Vipako attiti, vipaka patisamvedi attiti. Then finally we will go to the last paragraph of that page, page 49. Vipako attiti, vipaka patisamvedi attiti amanta, anyo vipaka patisamvedi iti, nahevang vattabbe, sankhitang, it has been abbreviated because it is the same argument. If you understand the argument regarding upalabbati, you also argue, it's the same structure and the same thing. So the structure of the argument is not different. In my comments in the page 20, my handout, the structure of the detailed argument is basically the same. The discussion highlights the significance of the proper understanding without resorting to any agent of action and its doer and effect and its experience. Now the whole section is dealing with kamma and vipaka. Whole section is dealing with kamma and vipaka. So in this Kathāvatthu discussion on Pudgala, this section on kamma and vipaka. Kamma, katta, vipaka, patisamvedi. These are the four concepts. You know, this is something very important because if you look at the historical debate, karma has been a major issue in the Pudgalavada debate because one of the very important aspects that people had to explain was how karma and the vipaka continues. Now, on the one hand, you have to accept that the same continuity is there. Otherwise, you know, you have to believe that anyo karoti, anyo patisamvedeti. But neither positions. So karoti, so patisamvedeti is not acceptable. Anyo karoti, anyo patisamvedeti is also not acceptable. So, at one level, you have to accept that there is action and doer and continuity of the vipaka and the experience But at another level, you have to distinguish these people. Doer and the experience are not exactly the same. Right? But on the other hand, if you cannot establish a connection between doer and experiencer, then whole thing is no point. If anyo karoti, anyo parisamvedeti, then what is the problem with that? It can't be justified. It is not just. If you do something and I get the result, what is the meaning of that? You do and you get the result. So, anyo karoti, anyo parisamvedeti is not just, not reasonable. But on the other hand, if you say so karoti, so parisamvedeti, then you are falling into the atmavada, which also you don't want to accept. So how to steer clear between these two extremes? Now this entire debate, you must be able to summarize. The whole issue is, centered around this action, doer, effect or vipaka, and the experience. How they are connected with each other. Now, interesting position is both Sakavadi and Paravadi are Anatmavadins. Both Sakavadi and Paravadi don't want to accept either so karoti so parisamvedeti or anyo karoti anyo parisamvedeti or any of the combinations. Both so and anyo karoti, both so and anyo parisamvedeti, or any amount of combinations. Those are not acceptable to both. So in one very important sense, both Paravadi and Sakavadi are in agreement. But subtle difference is Paravadi want to, at one level, to say that there is a stronger continuity. I mean, Paravadi also accept that there is a continuity. There must be continuity. So, this has been a problem not only for Kathāvatthu. Even today, it is a problem. How can you explain it? For ordinary people, ordinary people are not worried about it. They know that they have to undergo the vipaka. You do something bad, you get the result. But here the issue is, philosophical issue. Philosophical issue is how you define the continuity without accepting Atmavada. So if you look at the Buddhist Abhidhamma has been really trying very hard to establish this. Right? If you take the Chitta Vibhaga, Rupa Vibhaga, both Chitta Vibhaga and Rupa Vibhaga are basically to explain this. Now Chitta you have Utpada, Thiti, Bhanga, and then again Utpada, Thiti, Bhanga, and it goes on like that. But then why this Utpada, Thiti, Bhanga, and then again it's going to Utpada, Thiti, Bhanga, then you know that it is not the one and the same thing. Some Buddhists, like Sautrantika, did not even accept Thiti, because the Thiti moment they thought that, problematic. So they had Uppada and Bhanga. But in the Theravada tradition, we have Utpada, Thiti, Bhanga. And the Rupa and Chitta, of course, much better. Rupa lasts little longer. Chitta lasts much shorter duration. But, this whole analysis is to show that there is not something enduring something. Okay? You want to get rid of the concept of Atma. But it is enormously difficult to explain things without Atma. Now, that is why ultimately the Theravadins had to come up with the Bhavanga. Now, Bhavanga is, according to, Theravada tradition, that is the basic mind. That is the Bhavanga is the basic thought moment in which you are born. And also, according to Theravada, Bhavanga is the thought moment in which you pass away, you die. So, the whole thing is the existing through all the time. So it is something like this, bhavanga goes on like this. But, it comes up whenever you get sensory experience, it comes up and again goes to bhavanga, comes up and again goes to bhavanga. But then this bhavanga, bhavanga, as you know, is not available in the discourses. Bhavanga is available only in the Abhidhamma. But bhavanga also has problems. Because the moment you go to bhavanga, you are accepting something to be, the thought moments or mind existing without. But what the Buddha said to Sati was, Anyatra pacchaya nati vijnana sambhavu. There is no vijnana without condition. There is no vijnana without condition. But then we have to admit that there are conditions all the time. There are conditions all the time. So otherwise, according to Buddhism, you can't explain. Because consciousness has to be all the time. Right? Then you have to. But then with this difficulty, the Theravadins come up with bhavanga. Mahayanis came with ale vijnana. Anyhow, I am not going to go into these deep psychological, philosophical problems this morning. But you can see the difficulty. The difficulty is to explain karma and vipaka without resorting to any kind of atma belief or any kind of endurance. Not only atma belief, actually Buddhist tradition was really scared of, in a way you can say, any existence, any enduring entity. So that's why Sautrantikas even did not accept the concept of Titi. So they have Utpada and Bhanga, not Titi. But basically if you accept Utpada Titi Bhanga. So I think this discussion on Purisaka nuyoga is one of the very important discussions in the Kathāvatthu. So read it carefully, the Pali along with my, the reconstruction. You can see, how the argument goes. But it's a very fairly long section. But I have shown to you, if you look at the arguments are pretty much the same. Although the section is long, we don't need to have that much of a long section. Okay, then we will move into the number 11, Abhiññā nuyoga, Abhiññā anuyoga, examination by super knowledge, Abhiññā anuloga. The issue of Pudgala is examined with reference to the person who develops the 5 super knowledges, namely Iddhivida, miraculous powers, Dibbasota, divine ear, Pubbhenivasa, recollection of one's past births, Parachitta Vijanana, knowledge of others' minds, and Asavakkaya, extinction of the influxes. So, Abhiññā nuyoga is basically that. Question number 1. Vattabbam puggalo upalabbhati saccikatta paramathenati amanta. Actually, this question is raised by the Paravadi. Vattabbam puggalo upalabbhati, Navattabbam. Navattabbam puggalo upalabbhati saccikatta paramathenati. Isn't it the case that Pudgala is not known? One should not say that Pudgala exists. Amanta. Amanta means yes. Yes means no. Nanu atti kochi iddhing vikubbatiti. Amanta. Hanchi atti kochi iddhing vikubbati. Tenavatare vattabbe puggalo upalabbati saccikatta paramattena. Now the question is there one who performs miraculous powers? Iddhim vikubbati. Theravadi says yes. If there exists one who performs miraculous powers, then you must say that Pudgala exists as a real and ultimate sense. Tena matare vattabbe puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramatthenati. Now the argument seems to be this. If you ask Iddivida, Dibbasota, Pubbe Nivasa, Chutupapata, Asavakke, these jnanas exist, knowledge, yes. Iddivida exists, yes. Now, if you accept that Iddivida exists, then you have to accept that there is a person who is performing Iddivida. Nanuatti kochi iddim vikubbati iti amanta. So if you accept Iddivida, then you have to accept that there is a person who is performing Iddivida. Sakavadi says yes. Then the Paravadi's question, Hanchiyatti kochi iddim vikubbati. If there is a person who performs Iddhi, tena matare vattabbe puggalo upalabbati. Now you see again, the Sakavadi want to say no to that there is a person who performs Iddhi. He says yes. Of course, if you talk about Iddhi with a jnana, then you have to also accept the existence of a person who has jnana or who is performing Iddhi with it. But then, according to Paravadi, if you accept a person who is performing miraculous acts, then you must also accept the existence of a Pudgala. But Sakavadi doesn't want to accept that. Then same argument goes on. Vattabbam Puggalo Upalabbat Satchikatta Paramattenati Amanta Nanu Attikochi Dibbaya Sotadhatuya Saddang Sunati Parachittang Vijanati Ubbe Nivasang Anusarati Dibbena Chakuna Rupam Passati Asavanang Khayang Satchikaroti iti amanta. So the same question is asked about other four things. Attikochi Asavanang Khayang Satchikaroti. If there is a person who is realizing the extinction of asavas, tena vatare vattabbe puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramatthenati. Then you must say that puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena. Then now next question is Sakavadi's question to the Paravadi. Attikochi iddim vikubbaditi katva tenacha karanena puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattenati amanta. So Sakavadi asks, do you say that on the claim that there is a person who is performing miraculous powers, do you want to say that tenacha karanena, due to that reason, Puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattenati? Paravadi says yes. Yo iddim vikubbati so puggalo. Yo iddim na vikubbati na so puggaloti. Na evam vattabbe. Then Sakavadi's question is, whoever performs miracle is a puggala. Yo na vikubbati. Whoever doesn't perform miracle is not a puggala. Na evam vattabbe. One should not say so. Now, try to understand that question. Again, that question is something like that. The question is, all those people who perform miracles are Pudgalas. But all the Pudgalas, something like, do all Pudgalas who perform miracles? No. You remember our categorical assertions we discussed earlier. So you can say all Pudgalas, all who perform miracles are Pudgalas. Does that mean that all Pudgalas perform miracles? No. So this question of Sakavadi is involving that what we discussed, categorical propositions. A proposition which cannot be distributed, right? Remember that? Okay. Now this is what it is about. So, yo iddim vikubbati so puggalo. Yo iddim na vikubbati na so puggaloti. Na evam vattabbe. Now if you say all the people who perform miracles are individuals, and if you think that all individuals perform miracle, then of course those people who don't perform miracles are not Pudgalas. Paravadi says Nahevang Attabbi. Then the same argument, so Dibbaya Sotadhatuya and so on. So there are only basically two arguments. Number one argument is from Paravadi to Sakavadi, based on this Abhinya, whether the person he performs has Abhinyas and are the same. Now that is the Paravadi argument to the Sakavadi. And the Sakavadi's argument is basically based on that idea, admitting that there is one who performs miraculous powers. Do you admit that Pudgala exists as a real and ultimate fact? Yes. One who performs miraculous powers alone is Pudgala. One who does not perform miraculous powers is not. One should not say so. The same argument is made with regard to the rest of the four super knowledges by Sakavadi. So this Abhinya nuyoga is basically based on the Abhinya. Now, here what you can see is both Sakavadi and Paravadi tries to establish their points with reference to various aspects found in the Dhamma. Now here they go to this concept of Abhinya. So every moment you talk about Abhinya, you have to also talk about a person who has Abhinya, right? I mean, there can't be Abhinyas without persons. Particularly when you say knowledge, not like other thing, Mahapatavi or Mahasamudra is a different matter. But whenever you talk about knowledge, you are talking about someone's knowledge, right? Can knowledge exist without anybody who knows? No. Maybe Mahapatavi we can say the earth can exist without anybody. But knowledge is, so you have to see this subtle difference. When it comes to knowledge, you have to admit that knowledge exists always with reference to some person. Without a person, you can't have knowledge existing. So that's a good argument then for both. Paravadi want to show that there is a Pudgala, but not exactly the Atma. But on the other hand, Sakavadi want to use that opportunity. So if you believe that, there is a person, there is one who performs miracles, is that the Pudgala? Then, Paravadi doesn't want to say, there is a special case of Pudgala there, while he admits the Pudgala. So, argument for both Sakavadi and Paravadi is based on these five knowledge, forms of knowledge. Now, Sakavadi's argument goes a little bit into the logic in a way. He asks whether the those people who do not perform miracles are not Pudgala. No. I mean, here the whole issue is broader category. The broader category is Pudgala. So when you ask, yo iddin na vikubbati na so Pudgaloti na hevang mattabbe. Pudgala may be performing miracles or not performing miracles. But whether performs miracles or not perform miracles, Pudgala is Pudgala. If you, I don't know whether it is clear to you, because there are two categories of arguments here. Look at this. We say X is tall. X is, FAIR. fair. X is intelligent. If you look at these statements, you can see when you say X is tall, fair, intelligent, we are talking about some attributes. But when you talk about X exists, is this last sentence equal to other sentence? No. Why? Now when I say X is intelligent, the moment I say X is intelligent, I admit that there is somebody called X is there, right? I don't have to prove it. I mean, otherwise, how can I talk about X being intelligent if I don't accept the existence of X? So the moment I say that X is tall, I'm saying that there is a person called X and that person is tall. There is a person called X, that person is fair, and so on. But this is different. So exist is not an adjective like this. In fact, in the Western philosophy, the same argument has been made with reference to the existence of God. Kant make this very interesting distinction. Kant shows that, existence is not an adjective. Now, similar argument is here. You can talk about Pudgalas performing miracles or not performing miracles. But you cannot talk about somebody being not Pudgala. Right? You can't talk about somebody being not Pudgala. Because that's a basic thing. It's like, you exist. And, do you see the difference? Logically, there are two different categories of this thing. Logically, there are two different categories of. So you can't mix it up. So then Sakavadi's argument is logically subtle. Sakavadi want to see whether Paravadi sees this logical difference. Okay? We can take a short break, but do you have any questions or anything? Yes. All right, we will start from next. So 12 through 15 we have Jnataka, Jati, Patipatti, Upapatti, Anuyoga. So taking the concepts of Jnataka, kinship, Jati, caste, Patipatti means way of life, birth, Upapatti. Now these four concepts are being used in order to, the question. So, Jnatakanuyoga Paravadi begins. Navattabang Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramattenati Amanta. So his question is to the Sakavadi. Navattabang Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramattenati Amanta. Nanu Mata Attiti Amanta. Hanchi Mata Atti Tenavattare Vattabbe Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramattenati. Now the argument is very clear. Should you not say that Puggalo is available in Sachikatta Paramatta? Then Amanta. Then Amanta means no, you should not say that Pudgala is available in Satchikatta Paramattha sense. Nanu Mata Attiti. Isn't it the case mother exists? Yes, mother does exist. Hanchi Mata Atti Tena Matare Vattabbe Puggalo Upalabbati Satchikatta Paramattena. If your mother exists, then you have to say that Puggala exists. Nanu Pita Atti, Bhata Atti, Bhagini Atti, Khattiyo Atti, Brahmano Atti, Vesso Atti, Suddho Atti, Gahatto Atti, Pabajito Atti, Devo Atti, Manusso Atti. Now, this list of things have to be understood as indicating Jnataka. Now, Mata, Pita, Bhata, Bhagini represent Jnataka. Khattiya, Brahmana, Vessa, Suddha represent Jati. Ghatha, Pabajita represent Patipatti. Then Manusso, Devo represent birth. So all these four categories. Argument is basically the simple argument. If you accept those people exist, then you have also to accept that Pudgala exists. Then Sakavadi's argument, Mata Attitikatva Tenacha Karanena Puggala Upalabbati Satchikatta Paramattenati. Mata Attitikatva, given the fact that mother exists. That's how you should understand. Mata Attitikatva. Tena Karanena. Due to that reason, Puggala Upalabbati Satchikatta Paramattenati, whether the Puggala is seen, understood in the ultimate sense. Amanta. Then Atti Kochi na Mata Hutva Mata Hoti iti Amanta. If there is a person who na Mata Hutva, who is not a mother, becomes a mother. Amanta. Atti Kochi Puggalo Hutva Puggalo Hoti iti. Na Puggalo Hutva. Is there a person who is not a Puggala but becoming a Puggala later? Na Hevang Vattabbe. Atti Kochi Pita na Pita Hutva Pita Hoti. Na Bhata Hutva, na Bhagini Hutva, Khattiyo Hutva, and so on. Again, this same thing is applicable to all these categories. Again, you can see the issue is between two different categories. Now, a person can be not a mother before, but mother after. Okay? So the concept of mother, if you take, you can be mother at one time, not mother at one time, and mother at another time. So you can be not mother, and then you can be mother. And the situation is not P, Pudgala, and Puggala. Now, whether the two are the same. Now again, you see the difference is fundamentally, if you talk about, say, unmarried woman, she is not a mother. But then later she gets married and, have children, we can say she is a mother. So it is possible that somebody can become from being not mother to mother, being not father to father, being not brother to brother. Say if you are the one child in the family, male child, then you don't have brothers. But then when you become second, then you have a brother. So like that. But then the issue is whether you can become, someone can become at one stage not Pudgala and Pudgala. Two are two different things. Two different categories, okay? Two different categories. Because you can't talk about somebody being not Pudgala. It's like, somebody as I said earlier, somebody as non-existing. It's not like that. Whenever we say X is intelligent, we can't ask whether X exists. Because the moment we say X is intelligent, we have said that, exist. The same thing here. So from this to, you can go this. But this, from this to, you cannot go this. You see again, it's a subtle logical difference there. Subtle logical difference. Then Sakavadi's further argument, Mata Titikatva Tena Chakaranena Puggalo Upalabhati Sachikatta Paramatena Amanta Attikochi Mata Hutva Namata Hoti Amanta Attikochi Puggalo Hutva Napuggalo Hoti. The same thing again, the other way around. So whether somebody can be being a mother, later becoming not mother. Suppose you have a child and then you are a mother. If you don't have that child, then later, you are not a mother in relation to anybody because your child is dead or something. So the argument can go both ways. Now anyhow, the basic argument in the whole section is this. Okay? Paravadi's argument is, if you accept mother, should you not accept existence of Pudgala? And Sakavadi's argument is based on, if you accept that somebody can move from being not mother to mother, then the question is, can somebody move from being not Pudgala to Pudgala or being Pudgala to not Pudgala? So you can't change that. So that is the Jnataka nuyoga adi. Then the next one is examination by anyway, just read the last paragraph of my handout for that. In this context, categories such as mother, father, etc. are not intrinsic but arbitrary characteristics dependent on external circumstances. But Pudgala cannot be considered such a secondary category. One may imagine a Pudgala as not mother, but one may not be able to imagine a Pudgala as not Pudgala. You see the difference? You can think about a woman as not mother. You cannot think about a Pudgala as not Pudgala. Because the category of Pudgala cannot be separated from whole existence. Okay? So it's pretty much, difference between the fundamental concepts. Okay. Next, we will move into the Pativeda Anuyoga. Pativeda means Prativeda. That means realization, examination by realization. The issue is examined with reference to those who have gained realization, namely the stream winner Sotapanna, one's returner Sakadagami, non-returner Anagami, the worthy one Arahanta, one liberated by both aspects, Ubato Bhaga Vimutta, Panya Vimutta, liberated by wisdom, body witness, Kayasakhi, the Tippatta, one with right view, liberated by faith, Saddha Vimutta, Dhamma follower, Dhammanusari, and faith follower, Saddhanusari. You are familiar with this list of noble persons. I mean, the list represents the different levels of realization. So the argument goes, Paravadi should not say that Pudgala exists as a real and ultimate fact. Yes. So Pudgala doesn't exist, real and ultimate sense for Sakavadi. Does stream winner not exist? So the question is, Sotapanna doesn't exist. Hanchi Sotapanno Atti Tenavatare Vattabbe Puggalo Upalabhati Satchikatta Paramattenati. So the same argument he presents, if the stream Bina exists, then you should say that Pudgal exists as a real and ultimate fact. Paravadi makes the same form of argument with regard to the once returner, faith follower. Same thing. Vattabbam Puggalo Upalabhati Satchikatta Paramattenati. Now this is again Paravadi. Nanu Sakadagami Atti, Anagami Atti, Arha Atti, and so go through the whole list. Tenavatare Vattabbe Puggalo Upalabhati Satchikatta Paramattenati. So this is Paravadi's argument. Paravadi says if you accept these Pudgalas, then you must also accept existence of Pudgala. Then Sakavadi's argument is Sotapanno Atthītikatva Tenaca Karanena Puggallo Upalabhati Satchakatta Paramattenati Amanta. Paravadi says yes. Attikochi Sotapanno Hutva Na Sotapanno Hutva Sotapanno Hotiti. Yes, that is possible. Attikochi na puggalo hutva puggalo hotiti nahevang vattabbe. Now that is the same argument as here, okay? Somebody can before be non-sotapanna, later be sotapanna. That's okay. But can somebody be non-pudgala before and pudgala later? No. Again, the question is, Sakavadi is trying to see whether Paravadi has the understanding of that, these two are two different categories. Sotapanna is Sakadagami, Anagami, Arhant. These are attributes you can acquire. So, before you acquire these attributes, you are not Sotapanna. Once you acquire attributes, you are. But Pudgala is not like that. If you are Pudgala all the time. If you are non-Pudgala means you don't exist really. So that's why two different categories. So in fact in philosophy we are using a term for this. This is again in Western philosophy they use the term it's called category mistake. Category mistake means you combine two different incompatible categories. So that's a category mistake. Like in our earlier example, you can talk about X being intelligent, but if you try to talk about whether it exists, these are two different things. You can talk about the attributes, so the existence is not an attribute. Similarly, you can talk about different categories. Categories are similar looking things, but of course representing different situations. So it's called category mistake. One of, I think, philosophers' books, the example has been given. She came in a sedan in a flood of river, flood of tears. She came in, we can say she came in a sedan means a comfortable car in a flood of tears. Now we can say a person is coming in a motor vehicle. That is one thing. We can also say a person is coming in a flood of tears. What does that mean? Is it like coming in a motor vehicle? Now when you say somebody came in a flood of tears, that means somebody was weeping. But you are talking about somebody coming. So in a language, we can say she came in motor vehicle in flood of tears. Now, coming in a motor vehicle and a flood of tears are two different things. Coming with or in a flood of tears means you are not coming in a motor vehicle or something. So this is given example for category mistake. You are mixing up two different categories. Okay? So the similar thing is going on here. You are somebody being a mother and somebody being a pudgala are, two different things. So that we have to see that. Then very last argument of Sakavadi. Sotapanno atthitikatva tenachakaranena puggalo upalabdha sachikatta paramatthenati amanta. Attikochi sotapanno hutva nasotapanno hoti iti amanta. Attikochi puggalo hutva na puggalo hoti iti nahevang mattabbe. Now, attikochi sotapanno hutva nasotapanno hoti iti amanta. Attikochi puggalo Puttwana Puggalo Hoti Nehevang Mattabbe. Now, this raises a little bit of a question. When you are Sotapanna, can you be not Sotapanna later? Can you lose? Now, in the Buddhist tradition, there is a long debate. In the Kathāvatthu Pakarana also, we have that debate. Parihayati Araha Arahatta. So, some people believe that even Arahant will lose Arahanthood. Some people believed, but Theravada doesn't believe. But it looks like Theravada believes that you can become a Sotapanna and you can lose your Sotapannahood. So, I think this is applicable up to Anagami. But it is not applicable to Arahant, according to Theravada tradition. But anyhow, that is a doctrinal point. But the point is, somebody can become a doctor, and you can be a non-doctor. When you get your doctorate, you become a doctor. You don't say it cancels your doctorate, that you are not a doctor anymore. Something like that. So that I think that we don't need to confuse this with Dhamma matter, but question is whether somebody can be a Sotapanna, Sotapanno hutva na Sotapanno hoti. First he becomes a Sotapanna and then become not Sotapanna. Amanta. Attikochi puggalo huttana puggalo hoti iti nehevang attabbe. But you can't talk about somebody not being pudgala and becoming pudgala. Then you have attikochi sakadagami hutva, anagami hutva, and so on, the same argument. We will move on to the next argument, Sanghanuyoga, examination by community. The issue is examined with reference to the 4 pairs of the noble Sangha and 8 noble persons. Now it is basically the same argument. Paravadi should not say that Pudgala exists as a real and ultimate sense. Yes. Are there not 4 pairs of men and the 8 individuals? Navattabbam Puggalo Upalabdha Sachikatta Paramatthenati Amanta Nu Chattaro Purisa Puggala, Atta Purisa Puggala Titi, Amanta, Hanchi Chattaro Purisa Puggala, Chattaro Purisa Yuga, Atta Purisa Puggala Atti, Tenavatare Vattabbe, Puggalo Upalabdha Sachikatta Paramatte. Now the same argument in the Sangha we accept that Chattari Purisa Yugani, 4 pairs of people, Sotapanna Maggapala, Sakadagami Maggapala, Anagami and Arahant Maggapala. And Nattapurisa Puggala, altogether 8 people. So if they accept, Tenavatare Vattabbe Puggala Upalabdha Sachikatta Paramattenati, Paravadi says, if you accept Attapurisa Puggala, Chattari Purisa Yugani, then you must accept Puggala exists. Then Sakavadi's argument, Chattaro Purisa Yuga, Atta Purisa Puggala, Attiti Katva, Tenaja Karanena Puggalo Upalabhati, Sachikatta Paramattenati, Amanta. Paravadi says yes. Chattaro Purusa Yuga, Atta Purusa Puggala, Atta Purusa Puggala, Buddha Patubhava, Patubhavanti iti. Now they rise with the rising of the Buddha. Buddha Patubhava, Patubhavanti iti. Now these 8 noble people and the 4 pairs of noble people, you can't talk about them unless there is the Buddha. So Buddha Patubhava, Patubhavanti iti. Amanta. Puggalo Buddha Patubhava, Patubhavanti. Puggalo Buddha Patubhava, Patubhavati iti. Na evang vattabbe. Then the question is, Puggala is available, found with the Buddha Patubhava. Now it is not. Now this is, what is this question? This question is a counter question by the Sakavadi. Because Paravadi says, if you accept the Attapurusa Puggala, then you must accept Puggala. Then Sakavadi want to say, if you say that Attapurusa Puggala's come into being only with the Buddha, do you want to say Puggala comes into being with the Buddha? So, this is a counter argument, because the Paravadi's argument also seems to be referring to Puggala. So if you accept that Puggala, then you have to accept this Puggala. Right? That is what seems to be Paravadi want to say. But then Sakavadi says, if you accept that Attapurusa Puggala rise with the rising of the Buddha, you have to accept that Puggala is also rising with the rising of the Buddha. Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Upalabhaditi Amanta Buddhasa Bhagavato Parinibbane Uchinno Puggalo Natti Puggaloti Nehevang Mattabbe. Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Upalabhaditi Amanta. Now there is, we have issue. Puggala comes into being from the appearance of the Buddha, yes. When the Buddha attains Parinirvana, Puggala is discontinued, does not exist any longer. One should not say so. Now here we have a case where Paravadi says both yes and no. To the earlier question he said no, nahevang vattabbe. But then the issue is Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Patubhavati iti. Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Patubhavati iti. Amanta. This is being from the appearance of Buddha. Buddha Sabhagavato Parinibbute Uchinno Puggalo Natti Puggaloti. Now why does Paravadi want to say that Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Patubhavati iti? Why? Any idea about that? How can Paravadi say that Puggala arises with the rising of? It is perfectly okay for us to say Attapurusa Puggala rise when the Buddha rises. Right? But how can we say that Puggalo Buddha Patubhava Patubhavati Amanta? Well, I do not really understand why, but let me, I have not anything mentioned here. I don't think anything is there in the commentary, but let me refer to commentary and get back to you. Do anybody has a commentary with you?
I think complicate Puggala and quantity of Puggala. For example, Professor Asanga is a professor. Asanga also Puggala. Puggala is Asanga. No.
But it looks like the question is different here, because now if you say Attapurusa Puggala arise with the Patubhava of the Buddha, because we know that Buddha teaches the Dhamma and people follow the Buddha and you attain these things, and so it is perfectly okay to say Attapurusa Puggala arise with the rising of the Buddha. But how can you say Puggala? I mean, if Puggala is there, whether the Buddha is there or not, Puggala has to be there. How can he say Puggalo Buddha Patu Bhava Patu Bhavati iti? Amanta?
In that sense, if the Abba Puggalo Buddha when he say no, he went to like he mean only one. Puggala and Buddha arises and say that. But in that when he say Amanda, the Buddha arises, Puggala also, Nada also in the single point.
No, but if you look at the language, Puggalo Buddha Patu Bhava, that is Panchami Vibhatti, Avadhi, from the, the either way, if you take in the Panchami sense, Puggala arises after the Buddha arises. But it doesn't make sense. Or Puggala arises with the rising of the Buddha, it doesn't make sense either. So I really don't see how it can be made meaningful. One way to make it meaningful would be to say that this whole discussion of Puggala arises after the Buddha. But it's not much of it because there is no essential connection between the rising of the Puggala and rising of the Buddha. But there is an essential connection between rising of the Buddha and risings of the Attapurisa Puggala. Because noble persons will not be there unless Buddha is there, right? But how can you say that persons, Puggala will not be there unless the Buddha is not there? Anyhow, there must be a reason. I don't see the reason, but that doesn't mean that there is no reason. We will try to see that. Okay. Okay. Okay, we will move to the next one. So that is examination by the nature of perception. Satchikatta Sabhava. Satchikatta Sabhava. Sabhava means nature. Satchikatta Sabhava means nature of perception. The issue is examined with reference to the constructed phenomena such as Rupa, etc. and the unconstructed Nirvana. The issue here is to determine the exact ontological status of Puggala, whether he belongs among the conditioned ordinary phenomena or among the unconditioned characteristic of Nirvana. It appears that either way, Paravadi is in a difficult situation. Now, if you look at the argument Satchikatta Sabhava, Puggalo Upalabhati Satchikatta Paramatyanati, Paravadi says yes. Puggalo Sankhatoti, Nahevang Vattabbe. Puggalo Asankhatoti, Nahevang Vattabbe. Puggalo Neva Sankato, Nasankatoti, Nahevang Vattabbe. So Puggala is Sankata, Puggala is Asankata, Puggala is Neva Sankata, no Asankata. All these positions are rejected. Now, Puggalo Asankatoti, Puggalo Sankatoti, Nahevang Vattabbe. Why Paravadi doesn't want to say Puggala is not Sankata? Then Puggala becomes like a table and a chair and any other thing. Because all the constructed phenomena are phenomena available in the world. So he doesn't want to put Puggala in that category, right? So he rejects the question. Puggalo Sankatoti Nahevang Vattabbe. Puggalo Asankatoti Nahevang Vattabbe. Why does he not want to say Puggala is Asankata? Why? Yeah, it is then become equivalent with Nirvana. So he doesn't want to say that. Puggalo neva sankato na asankato na hevang vattabbe. Then you can say that, you are rejecting Puggala to be either sankato or asankata. Then that also is not acceptable. Because Paravadi seems to be thinking that he can't be neva sankata na asankata because he has to be somewhere there. Neva sankata na asankata. That's why so he cannot say neva sankata na asankata. Because he cannot say it is neither Sankata nor Asankata. He can't attribute Sankata characteristic to him, nor can he attribute Asankata. So he rejects that also. So 3 positions are rejected. Puggalo neva sankato na sankatoti amanta. Sankatancha asankatancha upekha akhata tatiya hotiti nahevang vattabbe. Let me see my translation. Is there a third alternative other than condition non-condition? One should not say so. Sakavadi. Is there a third alternative other than condition non-condition? Yes. Is there not a statement made? Okay. Sankatancha asankatancha tapetva, right? Tapetva anyatha tatiya hoti iti. Accepting sankata and asankata, whether there is a third position. Nahevang vattabbe. Then argument goes on. Sankatancha asankatancha tapetva anyatha tatiya hoti iti amanta. Now you see here again there is a case where he says both amanta and nahevang vattabbe. Nanu vuttang bhagavata dvema bhikkave dhatuyo katamadve sankatacha dhatu asankatacha dhatu imako bhikkave dve dhatuyoti attheva suttantoti amanta tenahi na vattabbang sankatancha asankatancha tapetva anyat. Pardon me? Attanya tatiyati. Atti anya tatiyati. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to read Burmese. Atti anya tatiyati, which there is a third. So he says, Buddha says that, referring to the Buddha's statement, Dve dhatu sankata and asankata. So, na vattabbang attanya tatiyati. Third one. Puggalo neva sankato na sankatoti amanta. Anyan sankatang anyang asankatang anyo puggaloti nevang vattabbe. So if you accept Puggala is neva sankata na asankata, then you must say that Puggala is different. Now here you see what we see in Nagarjuna's philosophy as Chatushkoti is the found here. So there are 4 positions discussed. Sankata, asankata, both, neither. So these are the 4 positions. You have sankata, you have asankata, you have both sankata and asankata, you have neither sankata, no asankata. So all these 4 positions are rejected. Now 4 positions are rejected for 4 different reasons. So you carefully follow the argument, then you can see that. So the 4th one is Puggalo neva sankato na asankato. Paravadi says yes. Anyang sankatang anyang asankatang anyo puggaloti. Now Sakavadi asks whether you can separate sankata, asankata and puggala. Nahevang vattabbe. Khanda sankata nibbanang asankatang. Puggalo neva sankato na asankatoti. Amanta. Anye khanda anyang nibbanang anyo puggaloti nahevang vattabbe. Now what is the problem there? Because the whole thing is Paravadi doesn't want to say accept a puggala over and above in addition to khandaka. That's why. So anya sankata nibbanang asankatam puggalo neva sankato and so on. So he doesn't want to accept that. Then the final argument in that page, Rupan Sankatang, Nibbanan Sankatang, Puggalo Neo Sankato, Nea Sankato, Anyan Rupan, Anyang Nibbanan, Anyo Puggalo, Nehevang Attabbi. Vedana Sanya Sankara Vinyana. So the same argument goes for all Panchakhanda. Now he doesn't want to, on the one hand, he want to say Anyang Rupang, Anyan Nibbanang, Anyo Puggaloti. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to say that because, when you say Anyang Rupang, Anyang Puggalang, then you are accepting Puggala existing without Rupa. So the Paravadi's position is really subtle here. On the one hand, he doesn't want to say that Puggala is equivalent with Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vinyana. But on the other hand, he doesn't want to accept that there is something called Puggala over and above Panchakhanda. Okay? So that is the Puggalava's position. That's why he doesn't want to accept that. Not because the Nibbana is there, but simply he doesn't want to say Anyang Rupang Anyo Puggaloti. Nahevang Vattabbi. Then we move on. Puggalas Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Titasanya Tattam Panyayati. Amanta. Paravadi says yes. Puggalo Sankatoti Nahevang Vattabbi. So on the one hand, he doesn't mind to attributing some of the Sankata characteristics. Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Titasanya Tattam Panyayati are the characteristics of the constructed phenomena. So he says, Amanta. Then the question, Puggalo Sankatoti, he says, Nahevang Vattabbi. Then Sakavadi comes up with Tinimani Bhikkave Sankatassa Sankata Lakkanani Sankatanang Bhikkave Dhammanang Uppado Sankatanang Bhikkave Dhammanang Uppado Panyayati Vayo Panyayati Titanang Anyatattam Panyayati iti Puggalas Uppado Panyayati Vayo Panyayati Titasanya Tattam Panyayati iti Tenahi Puggalo Sankatoti. So Sakavadi says that if you accept these things, then you must also accept that Puggala is Sankata. Because Sankatas Sankata Lakkanani are Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Titasanya Tattam Panyayati. Now because initially Paravadi accepts that at the beginning of that statement, Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Titasanya Tattam Panyayati. He says Amanta. Based on that, Sakavadi says that Puggalas Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Titasanya Tattam Panyayati, Tenahi Puggalo Sankatoti. Then Puggala must be Sankata. So that is Sakavadi's argument. Sakavadi says, if you accept Utpada, Titi, Bhanga for the Puggala, then those are characteristics of the Sankata things, so Puggala must be Sankata. Now the issue is, although Paravadi want to say that Puggala has Uppada Titi Bhanga, he doesn't want to say Puggala is Sankata. Now that shows that on the one hand, Puggala has certain characteristics. But if you say Puggala is Sankata, then what happens is this chair is also Sankata. Table, buildings, all these things. Now he doesn't want to say Puggala is like that. So here the situation is, Puggalavada situation is, Puggala want to accept something with certain characteristics shared with other things, but at the same time different in certain other respect. So in other words, Puggala has Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vinyana. But Puggala is in between, not exactly as combination of Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vinyana, but not also different from that. Now if you don't say Puggala has Rupa, then Puggala can exist without Rupa. But Puggala is always with Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vinyana. Puggala exists for individual. You can't say Puggala has only Rupa. Then you have to say even chair has a Rupa, Puggala. But Pudgala is always in combination with all 5 things. But all 5 things are Sankata, but Pudgala is not Sankata. So actually the Pudgalavadi's position is something in between. Now that is why ultimately in the Pudgalavada literature they say that Pudgala is indefinable. You can't define. That's what ultimately they say. Okay, the argument goes on like this. Number 4 argument, Sakavadi, Pudgala is neither condition nor unconditioned. Yes. Conditioned is one, unconditioned is another. Pudgala is still another. One should not say so. Now, Pudgala is neither conditioned nor unconditioned. Paravadi says yes. Then Sakavadi construe this as Pudgala is conditioned is one, unconditioned is one, Pudgala is another. One should not say so. Now what is going on there? This is end of page 23. Actually when you say, if you look at carefully, you can see that when you say Pudgala is neither conditioned nor unconditioned, it could mean Pudgala doesn't belong to either category, but he belongs to different category. But Sakavadi, on the other hand, construe this as, okay, you say condition, you say unconditioned, you say Pudgala. So are you talking about 3 different things? So you see the same question is construed by Sakavadi in a different manner. But there is clearly a matter of understanding the ordinary grammar. When you say the Pudgala is neither conditioned nor unconditioned, it's true that you are referring to 3 different things. But that does not mean that you are saying that Pudgala is, both or something. I mean, logically, in a way, it's true that you are referring to 3 different things. But what you say is, you belong to some other condition which is neither Sankata nor Asankata. Let me write it down, you will see that clearly. Pudgala is neither Sankata nor Asankata. Now here you see Sankata, Asankata, Pudgala. So it's true that you are referring to 3 different things. Okay? Now Sakavadi uses this statement as referring to Pudgala, Sankata and Asankata and ask, are these 3 different things? But actually you cannot construe that sentence like that. When you say Pudgala is neither Sankata nor Asankata, that simply means that Pudgala belongs to a category, something in between, that's all. But it's true that, so it's partially logically okay for Sakavadi to construe this as referring to 3 different things. But what he is claiming is not really reasonable. So that's why Pudgalavadin says, don't say so. Do you see that point? Because in the sentence it refers to 3 different things. But what the sentence really says is, Pudgala doesn't belong to this or that. So, but Sakavadi does is to construe this sentence as referring to 3 different things and, the question, the Paravadi, whether these 3 are 3 different things. So, conditioned is one, unconditioned is another, Pudgala is still another. One should not say so. That's the number 3 argument. Number 4 argument is on khandhas. Aggregates are conditioned, Nibbana is unconditioned, Pudgala is neither conditioned nor unconditioned. Yes. Aggregates are one, Nibbana is another, Pudgala is still another. One should not say so. Now it is the same argument that goes on. The same form of argument is made with reference to each of the 5 aggregates. So you have Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, all these things. The argument you find Khanda Sankata Nibbana Asankatam Puggalo Neva Sankato Na Sankatoti Amanta Anye Khanda Anyang Nibbana Anyo Puggaloti Nehevangatabi. So the argument goes on like that. That is 53. Rupan Sankatang Nibbana Asankatang Puggalo Neva Sankato Na Asankato Attirupang Anyang Rupang, Anyang Nibbanang, Anyo Puggaloti Nehevangvattabbe. So Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana. So all these things, the same argument is gone. And then we have the argument next page. Puggalasa Uppado Panyayati, Vayo Panyayati, Tita Sanya Tattang. Amanta, Puggalo Sankatoti Nehevangvattabbe. Now, you know that argument goes on. And then we have then the argument, page 24, number 8, Sakavadi. The person who has attained nirvana exists in nirvana. Attha, or does not exist in nirvana. If he exists in nirvana, then he is eternal. One should not say so. If he does not exist in nirvana, then he is destroyed. One should not say so. Now that argument is a little bit different. Parinibbuto Puggalo Attattamhi Nattattamhi Attattamhiti Parinibbuto Puggalo Sassatoti Nehevangvattabbe Nattattamhiti Parinibbuto Puggalo Uchchinnoti Nehevangvattabbe. Now, you know, that is an interesting question, interesting way to put it. Now, you say, Parinibbuto Puggalo Atti. Parinibbuto Puggalo Natti. But then, Atti Natti questions are connected with Sassata and Uchcheda. Now, in a way, you can talk about whether a person who has attained nirvana exists. Yes. Or whether the person who has attained nirvana does not exist. So Atti and Natti can be used. However, whether Atti means Sassata, Natti means Uchcheda is the problem. Now in the Buddhist tradition, never use Sassata and Uchcheda to refer to nirvana. Never use Sassata and Uchcheda. Now that is why these terms are. So these terms are not also acceptable to the Paravadi also. So you cannot say, Paravadi says, Nehevangvattabbe. And then, Parinibbuto Puggalo Uchchinnoti Nehevangvattabbe. So you cannot say either Parinibbuto Puggala is Sassata or Parinibbuto Puggala is Uchchinna. Now, next argument is Puggalo kin nissaya tittatiti. Bhavang nissaya tittatiti. Bhavo aniccho sankato පටිච්චසමුප්පන්නෝ කය ධම්මෝ වය ධම්මෝ විරාග ධම්මෝ නිරෝධ ධම්මෝ විපරිණාම ධම්මෝ තියාමන්තා පුග්ගලෝපි අනිච්චෝ සංකතෝ and so on හේවං වත්තබ්බේ. So puggalo king nissaya tittati bhavang nissaya tittati. So puggala exists because of the bhava. Then the Sakavadi's question is, if bhava is anicca, whether puggala is also anicca? Then Paravadi says no. Then the Paravadi's argument, navattabbam puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattenati amanta nanuatti kochi sukam vedanam vediyamano sukam vedanam vediyamiti pajanati iti amanta. Hanchiyatti kochi sukam vedanam vediyamano sukam vedanam vediyamiti pajanati tena vatare vattabbe. Now, this question is again Paravadi's argument is, if there is a person who knows when he experiences sukha vedana, that he experiences sukha vedana, then you must say that puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena. Now, that statement is interesting because there is a puggala who knows that he experiences sukha vedana. Puggala who knows that he experiences sukha vedana. Now, when you say that, you are talking about a puggala who knows about his personal experience. So, Paravadi thinks that that is a good example to establish there is what is called puggala. So, there is a person who knows, this knowing internal thing. So, Sakavadi, of course, doesn't accept that. Sukam vedanam vediyamiti pajanati tena vatre vattabbe puggalo upalabbati satchikatta paramattena. The argument goes, I think, within oneself there is knower and the known. You are if you take a sentence like this, I know that I feel happiness. Now, when you put the sentence in this manner, I know that I feel happiness, it looks like we are talking about two different I's, right? I know that I experience. So, knowing I and experiencing I. I think so, this is what the Paravadi is aiming at. When you are self-conscious, you are conscious of yourself. What does it mean? Sukam vedanam vediyamano, sukam vedanam vediyami iti. I experience happiness. So while experiencing happiness, I experience happiness. So this language really allows you to think about the possibility of two different things. Okay? Now this is the Paravadi's argument. So based on the self-knowledge, knowing yourself. This is interesting philosophical question. I know that I know. Right? I know that I know. I know that I experience. Okay?
I know there is a knowledge.
Something like that. So, there is a difficulty every time you talk about the whole problem of self-knowledge. In fact, in the Buddhist philosophy, in the philosophical language, this is called swa-sangvedana. Swa-sangvedana. Swa-sangvedana means self-knowledge. So, how do you establish self-knowledge? Can you establish self-knowledge without positing two different people? So, Paravadi seems to be thinking that self-knowledge is impossible without thinking about two different people. Anyhow, this is a very interesting argument is going on there. So in order to talk about Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Pajanati, so you have to posit some kind of, the experience. So Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Pajanati. Sakavadi says yes. Then Paravadi says Hanchi Attikochi Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Pajanati Tena Matre Vattabbe Puggalo. So the question is about self-knowledge, knowing something about yourself, being aware of the experience, knowledge about knowledge. Okay? So this side. Pattabbam Puggalo Upalabbati Sachikatta Paramatthenati Amanta Nanu Attikochi Dukkam Vedanam Adukkam Sukham Vedanam, and so on and so forth. So it is basically the same argument. Then Sakavadi's argument, Attikochi Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Pajanati iti Katva Tenakarena Puggalo Upalabbati Sachikatta Paramattenati. So Sakavadi asked from the Paravadi, do you want to say that because there is a person who experiences Sukha Vedana, that there is a Puggala? Amanta. Yo Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Pajanati Sveva Puggalo. Yo Sukham Vedanam Vediyamano Sukham Vedanam Vediyamiti Na Pajanati Naso Puggaloti Na Evang Vattabbe. So based on that, Sakavadi asked, so the person who knows that he experiences happiness, is he the Puggala? And there can be a person who is not aware of that, his experience of happiness. Now he is not a Puggala. Then Paravadi says, Nahevang Vattabbe. Now you see again, Sakavadi responses in one manner, Paravadi responses in another manner. So it goes on like this. I think time is passing, so I will wind up from here. But basically I am done with these 18 things, but in my next discussion we will conclude this part of the discussion. Okay, then we will wind up for today, and thank you very much.
Thank you.